Hey guys, in this video we're going to assemble the left half of the engine and then put the two case halves together. And as you'll see, it didn't go as planned. Okay, so here we have the left side of the case, and what I want to do is make sure that it's super clean because I don't want little pieces to find their way through the oil passageways and possibly clog things up in the engine. That could do a lot of damage and not be fun. So I'm going to clean this bearing here and make sure that it's ready for installation. And we'll take the other pin. This is now the 5th pin, the only pin that goes in this side of the case. Put that into the case and then orient the bearing. Remember that the little divot goes towards the flywheel side, and I'll line that up and just kind of make sure that it's even on both sides and then press it down. And the next thing we'll do is put the cam bearings in, and those go in pretty simply. There are tangs on the bearings, and just line them up just like on the other side and push them down. Make sure they're solid. One thing that's a little different on the left side of the case here is that this front cam bearing doesn't have a thrust surface. It just has a tang, and it pops right in. Okay, next we have the oil pickup tube, and that just goes straight into this hole here. So what we'll need to do is change the O-ring off of the pickup tube. I just took the old one off, and then go into our handy dandy engine gasket kit and find the smallest O-ring, or the one that fits, and then we'll just put it over the end of the pickup tube. I'm coating it a little bit with Permatex Aviation, just to give it a little bit better seal and guard against it maybe getting cut when I put it in. So now we'll just slide it into the hole. It goes in pretty easy, and it has like a satisfying little snap like that when it goes in. Now look here at the eyelet on the top here. You can see how when you over tighten the strainer bolt underneath, how it would pull on that and crack the case. Now there's another plug that goes opposite the pickup tube, and I don't remember taking it out of the case, but I must have. I'm just going to put it back in and use the same treatment that I used for the oil galley plugs. Some Loctite around the threads, not too much, and just put it in and get it tight, but not overly tight. Just good and tight. That's a German word, you know. Hey, if you like my videos, please subscribe to the channel, give them a thumbs up, hit that little bell, and then you'll know when the next video is coming. This is a windage tray. Now I have a 2-liter case, so it's got slots to accept the windage tray, and there are gaskets that kind of seal everything off. Now the purpose of the windage tray is to keep the oil from sloshing around when you're doing hard cornering. But they're somewhat controversial because some people think that they prevent oil from getting back into the sump, and it can create an oil starvation situation. So what I'm going to do is hedge my bet a little bit, and I'm going to drill some holes in the windage tray here, which will allow more oil to get down a little bit faster, but still keep the windage tray in the engine. The holes I'm going to cut are going to be as close as I can get to these notches here, which is where oil drains down through from the lifters. Here are the gaskets that seal off the windage tray. These don't come in the typical engine gasket kit. And if you look closely, you can see the little slot that goes right over the tray. But they want to straighten out. So I'm going to put a few dabs of this ultra black RTV around the tray, which will act as just a tiny little bit of glue to keep the seals from straightening out or popping off the tray. Now they don't like to stay curved, so what I'm doing is using some rubber bands to hold them down. And they'll keep them secure until the RTV has a chance to set up. And I realized when I was doing this that I really did need to do the one here on the bottom, because that's going to go straight into the left side of this case, and we'll get it stuck in there. It's the ones on the top here that are going into the right side of the case, and they will need to defy gravity when I turn the case over to assemble them together. Okay, everything is cured and it's ready to go into the case. Just line it up with the slot. It can really only go one way. There's a metal protrusion there. And this bolt here goes through the hole in the oil pickup assembly here and attached to the windage tray to keep everything nice and secure. We'll just tighten it up, not to any crazy torque, just good and tight. And now this half of the case is done and ready to be mated with the other half of the engine. Before we do that though, I definitely want to make sure that everything is spotlessly clean so that the sealant will have a better chance of doing the job it's supposed to do. I'm using a white lint-free cloth so that I can see if any dirt is coming off. It's also a good time to make sure that none of the cam grease has been worn off and make sure there's plenty on it. Now to seal the engine case, I'm going to use Yamabond 4 or Yamabond, depending upon where you're from. It's kind of soft in the tube and it doesn't really ever dry hard. It's just a semi-drying gasket is what they call it. I'm going to squeeze a little bit out and then use a brush to spread it around and make sure that it's all over. Now I really feel like Bob Ross. Oh, there's a happy little tree. A nice little bush. Now here's where we're going to put the cam cap in. So I'm going to make sure there's enough sealant in that little groove. And here's the cam cap. I'm using a new one. And I'm just going to place it in and then tap it lightly with a rubber mallet to make sure it's seated. And then I'll just work my way around the engine. And I got to put some sealant in the slot for the cam cap on the other case half. Okay, now it's time for the moment of truth. We're going to assemble the two halves together. Putting the case halves together is a lot easier when you have four hands. And since I don't have four hands, these two belong to my friend Fred. You need the other hands to really just hold the rods up so the case can go down. So I'll grab this other half of the case that is prepped and ready to go, and I'll turn it upside down and start to get everything lined up while Fred keeps those rods vertical and make sure they don't get stuck inside the case. Just gotta align it up and make sure that the case through bolts are in the right spot and everything else, and then look at that, we're in. And now you can let them go. Okay, now here's a little bit of a scary part. We're going to use a rubber mallet to seat the case. So I'll just bang on it a little bit, but definitely not hard. And now before I go any further, I would just want to make sure that everything is rotating freely and nothing is bound. That we don't have any of the bearings slipping off pins or anything else, which I might be able to feel. And it's nice and smooth. So we're ready to proceed to torquing. Before we do that, I'm going to take some sealant and put that under the washers and around the threads here of the case through bolts. When you do this, make sure that you do it on the other side, the bottom side first. I didn't do that, so I had to crawl around and make sure that the sealant got on those too. But it's all part of the learning experience. Now I'm going to place the washers down where they're supposed to go. And then I'll put the nuts on. These are just the ones that came with the case. They're kind of old and ratty. I'll replace them anyway, but they're good for now. Okay, here's my digital torque wrench. We're ultimately going to take these nuts to 25 foot-pounds, but I'm going to go with 12 for right now because I want to take things in increments. And obviously it'll take a little while to get to that point. We've got to hold the head of the bolt underneath. And now we'll do like a crisscross pattern because we want to make sure that the case is torqued evenly and that we're not twisting it as we get everything secured. I don't want to go too tight too quickly before I check to make sure that the case is rotating freely. Don't want any binding. Uh-oh. That is not turning as easy as it should. It's moving, but okay, that's not how it's supposed to go. The crank is supposed to turn much more freely, almost effortlessly. The one thing I do know is that here in my shop, I don't have the kind of tools I would need to measure the tolerances in this engine with the precision that's necessary. So I'm going to take it to the machine shop and see what they say. I'm not really surprised by that because I've never done this before. And whenever you're building anything, especially something like an engine, I kind of expected to take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, or maybe even 2 steps back. So please subscribe and you can find out what happened to this engine along with me. Give it a thumbs up, hit that little bell so you know when the new episodes post. Thanks a lot for watching. Be safe and enjoy.